Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and welcome to a preview of the new Furious Wild DLC for Total War 3 Kingdoms. And this is the first of 7 videos that will come out this week, one per day, and we will showcase what's new in the game. So today, we're gonna go through the menus and check out the new map, which is definitely something that was changed from all the previous chapter pack. We have the biggest change from the maps ever in the game. So let's pop into a new campaign. And we can take a quick look at the new selection screen. So in every single time start, you have a group of recommended characters. Mainly it's going to be the 3 Kingdoms character plus whoever is recommended for that time period. And in this case, we have Liu Chong, Gong Sun Zan, and Meng Huo. And then if we move back to 182, we have again the 3 Kingdom characters plus Liu Chong and Zhang Jiao. And then we can also move on to the 194, a World Betrayed DLC. We have the big 3 again, except for Sun Jian is dead, and Sun Ce now taken over. And then Gong Sun Zan is still recommended, which is interesting. And then you have Lü Bu and Meng Huo as well, added in from this DLC. And then let's take a look at the long forgotten 8 princes. So Cao Cao's not playable. Let's switch over to the recommendation of Sima Yong. Now everyone still has just their own model, as in you only have the 8 princes modeled out, everyone else is generic. But if we look on the map, you can see that the map has been updated for the 8 princes as well. You have the expansion of the Nanman lands, and over here you see that it's abandoned. So none of the Nanman tribal factions made it into this DLC, but you still have their land that you can conquer, and I believe the same Nanman land mechanic is still active for them. And you have different portions of the map that are now abandoned based on the development of the Jin Dynasty. More of the southeast is colonized by the Jin Dynasty or Jin Empire at the beginning, and a lower portion is abandoned down here. While most of the land in the middle are taken, this part's still shaded out, and this part is all controlled. And speaking of this part, we'll talk about this really quickly here, very soon. And the purpose of this video is to familiarize with some of the new functions. Let's say, for example, in the game options, we now have what's called timeless characters. And when you select this, all the age figures will be gone from the game, and there will be no death by old age. So you just simply not see an age, instead of seeing the age continue to go up without dying. So basically you'll be timeless. And the seasons and years will still go on, but your characters will not die of old age. Aside from this, the menu did change a little bit here, but the functionality is about the same aside from this big change here. And for our video today, I'm going to be doing the showcasing on the 182 campaign. Simply because all the remove fog mods are not going to work with this beta build, so I can't really feature the factions I want to feature, and the best person I can use as your tour guide is actually the Emperor himself, because Liu Hong has the advantage of having the Empire in 182, and most of the map is lit up. Now obviously some regions of the map will be a bit different in terms of what area is currently deserted, and the Nanman lands are here, so we can still see them, and you can see they're not deserted during this time frame, even though we cannot play as any of the Nanman characters. So there are still tribes that exist in the 182 start, you just can't play as any of them in terms of playable characters. And if we want to compare to 194, which is probably something that many of you guys have not seen, the Nanman start is still very, very similar to what it was in the 190 start. So if you take a look, you're just a little bit bigger, but most of the situation is the same. So you can see that you have united the land next to you, which is kind of your first opponent in the 190 start. So basically you have a bigger opponent at the start, and you eliminated one of the tribes. So potentially you start out with a bit more fealty. We'll showcase all of these in detailed previews once this embargo period ends, because I am limited to only 200 minutes during this embargo period. So let's not waste any time and jump to the Emperor and have him show us around in this new map. So let's go. Alrighty, we're loaded into the game, but the game is not important here. The map is important here. So first thing you notice is a lot of the flag text got changed, as well as the flag themselves. There has been some recolorings and redoing of the theme. And right off the bat, next to where we start, we do have a gate. We have Hangu Guan, or Hangu Pass right here. And we have an army, so that'd be very nice thing for us to use to see how it works. You can garrison here, as you see. And then when you're garrisoned, you actually don't block most of the river. I believe you can still pass through. You just choke out the land because you can see this circle of influence. So I'm sure you can still traverse the river, and some of you might think that's very disappointing. Well, in a sense it is, but what they did to fix this is we have impassable areas. You see these, I guess, debris in the river here? These are impassable shallows, and you have to walk around them. So if you put an army here, or put an army in Tong Pass, or Tongguan over here, then they have to fight you. They cannot go through the river this way. And there's more of these. And you see they fixed the terrain. So the area around Xihe, this is all mountains and forests now. And over here in Anding, also all mountain and forests. So for you to get through this pass right here in the Yellow River, you have to land earlier and take the land route around to get through. And this mountain is huge, so you have to kind of loop through this valley here. So this valley is a nice key defensive hold. So that's another interesting change in terms of how you can progress around the river. And I believe those are the only two I noticed when I did the earlier scan. And we can check the Yellow River in its entirety. Looks pretty good so far. And over here is clear sailing. So this portion of the Yellow River, it's still clear sailing all the way over here. But we do have two areas around the capital. So I think the main deal is to protect Chang'an. The Chang'an region is very secured. And that's the way things are, because you have Wuguan over here, Tongguan over here, and you have Dasangguan over here. And then if you move down, you have Jiamengguan over here. So around Chang'an, you have a ton of passes defending these mountain passes. And some of these mountain passes, I believe, got altered a bit. You can still traverse here, but you see a lot of forests, so very difficult terrain to move through. And that's kind of what the gates are. More importantly, aside from these gate changes, we have a lot of naming changes as well as map expansions. So if we move out to the north east portion of the map, our empire has got expanded. So previously we had Liaoxi, or the western part of Liao. Now we have Liaodong, or the eastern part of Liao, and it extends all the way out to this peninsula here. And if we keep looking, there's potential. Not all mountains, a lot of land. One day we might see Korea added into the game. But to the north, we are pushing up against the limits here. So I don't know what they're going to do. They either have to move some mountains around, or maybe they just open up the land here and have a very difficult way for them to enter, which would make more sense actually, because the nomads, the way the boundaries are defined is basically based on these natural barriers. So we'll see what the direction of the Northern Expansion Pack next year will be. And another big change is you notice there is another name under the commandery name, and these are names of the city or town or county. So there's going to be an overarching commandery name, which has been modified for a lot of the commanderies in the game to match historical commandery name, because previously we did complain quite a bit about the use of province level names for commanderies, commandery level names for commanderies, and even sometimes city names for commanderies. Well, now the game has gone back in and modified it, so every single commandery name in the game is basically a historical commandery name, and they move some of the more famous city names into each of the counties within the given commandery. So now we have a bunch of cities. Now we'll cover some of the more important ones. The ones here are, kind of on the frontiers, not very historically relevant, so we'll save some time and ignore them. So now the other problem here is you will be finding it a bit difficult to identify what each county is. You have to rely on the symbol. You could obviously hover, but previously I believe this slot was where it says Toolmaker, which was informative, but I think we'll just get used to the UI and it'll be fine. And adding these names is really, really helpful for some of the historical context and direction of the game, which you'll see as we shift our map a little bit this way, and we can see Guangyang being added in to where I think this was called You earlier. And Youzhou is obviously the name of the whole province, so they modify it to Guangyang. Even though I vaguely remember this commander to be called Anyang, but I could be wrong because I'm not quite familiar with all the northern commanderies. There are so many of them and they're all very small. And moving down, Bohai, Anping, Zhongshan. And inside Zhongshan here, we have Changshan. And for those of you who are keen to the Romance of Three Kingdoms, you know this is Zhao Yun's hometown, and he's often called Changshan Zhao Zilong, and Changshan is here now in the game. As well as if we look down here, in Anping we now have Julu, which is the hometown of the Zhang brothers, so we have the origin of the Yellow Turban Rebellion also added into the game. So on a grand level, we now have a lot more cities where previously we didn't. And we have Wei, Wei being the name of the commandery, which is why Cao Cao eventually became Duke of Wei and King of Wei, and the kingdom became Wei, because Ye was eventually given as his capital, and he was given this land here. So calling a commandery Ye would make no sense since it was the name of a city. Now we have it fixed, and it makes sense why Cao Cao eventually became the kingdom of Wei here. Aside from that, most of the commandery names are quite similar, it's just pass being added in. We do have one big nerf to the north. If we come into Hedong, for those of you who remember, Hedong used to be a commandery that had a copper mine. Well, that's not the case anymore. We now have an iron mine here, and I believe we also have a trade port. Now, it's not a bad combination. For Hedong itself, it's actually quite good. You now have a commerce and industry commandery that's actually quite attractive in the north that was previously non-existent, as the shape of this commandery got changed quite a bit. You have a circle for the town area and the loop for the trade port into a pass, and over here is all iron mine. But previously it was a copper mine over here where the pass was. So with the loss of one copper mine here, you lose faction-wide anti-corruption. So that is a big hit for the north. As we can see, none of the symbols change into the copper coin symbol. So there's no copper in the north anymore. Now the map did compensate this by giving one such copper to the Nanman lands. So the Nanman lands actually have copper down here, as well as this is Jiangyang. So this was copper before, but there's another copper down here. I'm not going to be showcasing the Nanman land in detail for this preview, but we'll do that for when we focus more on the Nanman factions, which will be plenty of coverage going forward. But this is the one where we'll look at the whole map. And I believe another spice resource was added into the Nanman lands over here, which will bring our total up to potentially 4, unless they took away one from over here, which might be what they did, because I only see 2 right here. So potentially they added a spice into here instead. That way we still have 3 balanced with the 3 in the north. So overall, the copper loss from the north does hurt the other factions in the map, especially in the central plains, because we had very little access to copper in the first place. Most of them are down south, and now pretty much all of them are down south except for Wudu right here. Okay, jumping back in to see what else has changed. We have talked about naming, we talked about passes, we talked about the big change to Hedong. Let's look at some other naming changes over here. So Yinchuan is now Xuchang. So this is the capital of Cao Cao's faction eventually, and also where the emperor would have his imperial court after Cao Cao takes the emperor. So that's quite a big addition to the game. And Chen has been modified a bit. So Chen Livestock Farm gave up a little piece of land and gave it to Pengcheng. So Pengcheng's capital is now right next to Chen, and it only has the temple as part of its holdings. So Pengcheng is really not going to be your economic powerhouse, but you can definitely make this your military stronghold because there's no income out of this whatsoever. And what used to be Pengcheng is now Xiapi. So Xiapi is officially in the game. This is the place where Sun Jian was mayor. This is also the place where Lü Bu would eventually die. So that's quite historically important to have in the game. And this takes over the old farmland that was part of Pengcheng. So that's another big change as well. Then we have some minor modifications. This used to be Langya. Well, it is still Langya, but the old Langya was spelled incorrectly. It was YE, which doesn't make the Ya sound. They fixed it to be Langya, which is correct. A very nice addition. And Taishan has been renamed to Le'an. So Le'an is actually the name of the commandery that was kind of in this corner historically. It's quite small. Taishan is the name of a mountain, so I'm glad they fixed that. And now we have Le'an in its place. So that's the only big change in this region. Everything else is still quite similar, just a rename down here in Langya, and then we have a big change here in Pengcheng region. Moving down south, we have also some more historical city added. Haixi is quite important as well during Sun Ce's campaign. Most of these names are quite familiar and referred to in our lore series. Now they're officially in the game. But a big change is here. Yangzhou, which is the name of the entire Yang province, has been removed, and now we have Huainan, which is the correct name for the commandery here. And the capital of Huainan, of course, is Shouchun, where Yuan Shu had himself become an emperor. And he is starting out here in the 182 campaign, which is a bit weird since he should be part of the empire at this point. But that's fine. And if we peek down a little bit south, you can see where this naming convention is going to be really great for the game, because we have places like Hefei added into Lujiang. So this would take, a lot of big battles between Wu and Wei would take place right here, and giving it next to the settlement makes a lot of sense since Hefei is heavily fortified. And then down here you have Shu Xian. You're going to see a lot of Xian as the ending of names, Xian. Xian means county. So Shu Xian is the hometown of Zhou Yu, and it was also referred to in our lore series. And if we come down south, we're going to see some more changes. The commandery of Jianye, which is the name of the city, is now Danyang, which is the correct commandery name. And Jianye itself, it's a bit of a misnomer, but we'll let it slide because Jianye was given its name when Wu decided to make it its capital. Beforeward, I think it's called Shitoucheng, but it's fine. I think it's a minor issue. Maybe after 210, it's called Jianye, but before then, the city didn't exist. It was a very minor fishing village. But Danyang is definitely the correct move here, and we can see the county of Wu as well. So Wu obviously gives its name to the kingdom of Wu. So once again, we have a correct reference on the map. Everything makes a bit more sense. No major changes here until we get to Jian'an. Jian'an is now split between northern Jian'an and southern Jian'an, and that's okay. And then also Linhai over here. So we are going to lose some vision here, and that's going to be fine. The naming is really the only change. They didn't change too much in regards to what's actually part of the old commanderies. This used to be, I think, Dongguan or Dong'an, which is now the name of the settlement. And now the issue down here is, historically, this whole territory, since it was so unsettled, was all called Kuaiji. And once the Sun clan established the kingdom and started developing it, then we had commanderies like Jian'an. They started breaking up the territories, making smaller commanderies out of it. So having this earlier name change is fine to prevent excessive name changing between time periods. I'm okay with this. Yuzhang is the same, Poyang is the same, Chang'an is the same, except we have some exciting name changes in terms of the city. The Changsha trade port is now officially called Chibi, hinting at something we might see later. And Nan, which used to be Jiangling, Jiangling is the city name, Nanjun is the name of the commandery, so Nan is correct here. And we also have what's called Huarong here. And for those of you who know the story well, Huarong Dao, or the narrow pass of Huarong, is where Cao Cao made his final escape after the defeat at Chibi. And this is where Guan Yu was holding down this path to prevent him from escaping, but ultimately let him go based on some mercy and compassion for the time he spent serving under Cao Cao. So Jiangling, the city, is now a city, and we have some more interesting names added into the game as well. So this is a very welcome change in regards to what can potentially become the future of more chapter packs. We can have more story elements added in by having the city in place. And if we move north, we have Xiangyang, and over here, talking about smaller names, we have Xinye, which is the first battle that Zhuge Liang actually served in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. So potentially what we'll see is that we have Liu Biao obviously in control of Xiangyang and the Jin province in a later chapter pack. And Liu Bei is probably going to be placed here in Xinye because that's the area that Liu Biao gifted over to Liu Bei to kind of act as a buffer zone between Liu Biao and Cao Cao. So now that Xinye is on the map, we see that Liu Bei is probably going to start here in the future. And then we have Wanxian, or the county of Wan in Nanyang. This is also where we have Wancheng, where Cao Cao's poor son died because some knightly activities by Cao Cao. So names are coming in and stories can be told this way. And if we go slightly out west, we have some more changes as well. We have a naming change, Jinzhao. So this is the capital province reference, so that's totally fine. Chang'an still here, and this is Lantian. So Lantian is one of the famous jade producing areas in China, thus the jade mine. And Lantianyu is the jade that was that's still very, very famous in China. If you go and buy jade in China, it's pretty much Lantianyu and Hetianyu, and there's another producer in Xinjiang region, but the name escaped me. But basically, Lantian is quite famous for its jade, so having this is nice. And if we look in Hanzhong, right next to the capital, we have Meixian. So Xian once again means county, so county of Mei. And for those of you who remember from our Dongzhuo lore series, Dongzhuo is given the title of second Marquis of Mei, and he built himself a fortress here to outlast the coalition, and it's right next to the capital, makes perfect sense. And then we have Wudu. Nothing else has really changed here. Naming's the same. You added obviously minor names to settlement, and even though we don't see it, Wuwei looks the same. And if we go south, we obviously have this very strong pass holding this main road, and the mountain pass here is still available through Wudu's copper mine, and this is going to be the path that's going to be referenced for a later invasion of Shu, as you know, the Jin army crossed into this area and wiped out Shu from behind the pass over here. Sad day. Down here, we have a renaming of Shu. So now all the three kingdoms are officially named on the map, and you can kind of see the origins of them. And Chengdu, being the name of a city, is now the name of a city. So everything makes sense. And we have this symbol here, which we'll talk about a little bit. I'm trying not to talk too much about the Nanman factions, as we do have a bunch of guides coming out this week. So Nanman lands are permanent. So these are historically Nanman land. They will always stay Nanman land. They will have different buildings, and we'll talk about the buildings once the guide comes out tomorrow, because that's the next thing we'll talk about. So they will function a bit differently than your typical Han territory land. And even you see here, even though a Han general or a faction holds it, it is still historically Nanman land. So these land are just going to be always Nanman land, and this is going to throw off some balance in the game, as the buildings are quite different, especially with the settlement. The counties are the same. So like most factions, like bandits, yellow turbans, and the Han faction, the counties will always be the same. So that part's not changed, but the settlement will be quite different. And we see that Zhangke has now belonged to the Nanman land, so that's going to alter that economy structure as well. Our T resource over here. Cangwu is the edge, and Yulin over here, Jiaozhi. And because Shixie holds it, it is still the Han territory. Now obviously Shixie is not here yet in 182. He is actually in our court. I can't really show you the detail, but I think it's safe for me to show you that he's here. I think this is definitely something the embargo statement didn't actually fine print. They did say we cannot show off his factions, but we can fight him in battle if we wish. But I don't think it's fair in the spirit of the law for me to show the details, so we're just going to let you know he's here. And this is historically correct. Shixie's father is from Rinan, which is this last bit of county over here. It's Jiuzhen and Rinan are actually separate commanderies, but the game saved some space and made it just Jiuzhen, and Rinan is just a minor name in the minor settlement down here. And that's totally fine. You gotta save space somewhere. The northern commanderies are so tiny and so wild all over the place. And down here, so basically Shixie's family is from over here. His family escaped. They're refugee families from the north, obviously, but they have made a home for themselves down here. He was the administrator here, and when Shixie was growing up, the father wanted to send him to learn Confucianism and just in general school at a better school. So he actually sent him to the capital, where he learned after a very famous Confucian scholar who died during the eunuch and scholar conflict right before 182, this area. But he was in the capital for this period, Shixie, along with most of the characters, to be honest. Most of the characters should be in the capital here. And eventually, when his father died, he was able to go back to the Jiao province and take over as one of the other administrative positions, because family members are usually not allowed to serve in their hometown. So it's pretty taboo for Shixie to be able to serve in where he was born, because usually the Han government structure wanted to prevent that in case you ally with the locals to rebel. But given that his father is dead and no one really wanted to go south, and he volunteered, so the court agreed, and he eventually volunteered his 3 brothers as well to become administrators, and the court agreed as well, since no one was really willing to go that far south. So it worked out for his family. And that's pretty much all I wanted to show you guys. Basically the addition of these new names, some of the name changes, and some of the modifications on the map in terms of where new commanderies are added, some rebalancing with the copper mine, and the changes to the river. It's mainly heavily focused in this region. Chang'an is going to be a rock now. So many passes, so many impassable riverways, and the terrain working in your advantage as well, forcing people to come through narrow choke points that you can defend, and you also have all these river system. Chang'an is just going to be really, really strong. So that's pretty much it for this video. We're trying to keep things as short as possible to give us time for other guides. So hope you guys enjoyed this one, and see you guys in the next one. Bye!